My parents insisted that I forgive my sister for her betrayal with my ex-husband, and then they demanded that I provide financial support for them and her new family. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you amazing content. Your support means the world to us, so let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's start the video. Alright, this is going to be a long one. I'm 34, female, and I need to share what's been happening because, honestly, I'm losing my mind and could really use some outside perspective. This whole mess started a long time ago, so I guess I should explain the background first. I grew up in a pretty average suburban home outside of Boston. My parents weren't terrible, at least not at first. They both had decent jobs, we went on regular family vacations, and did the whole cookout thing in the summer, just normal family stuff. I was their only child for 8 years, and things were actually pretty good. Then my sister, Chloe, was born. I know how this sounds, trust me, I've spent enough time in therapy to know this isn't just typical older sibling jealousy. The day Chloe came home, it was like someone flipped a switch, and I became invisible in my own house. I don't mean that in a dramatic teenager way, I mean my parents literally forgot about me half the time. For instance, when I was in 6th grade, I spent 3 months building this incredibly detailed solar system model for the science fair. I built everything from scratch and even programmed a little Arduino to make the planets move. The judges were so impressed that they gave me a special award for my math work. My parents didn't show up because Chloe had a t-ball practice, not even a game, just practice. The living room walls were covered with Chloe's participation ribbons while my science fair trophy sat unopened on the mantel for a week before disappearing into the basement. My mom still has Chloe's macaroni art from kindergarten framed in the kitchen, but she couldn't tell you where my high school diploma is. My dad was even worse about it. There was this one time I had a huge robotics competition that my team had worked on for months, and I was the team captain. Dad promised he'd come, but the morning of the competition, Chloe decided she wanted to try baseball, not even a real game, just throwing a ball around in the backyard. Guess who didn't make it to my competition? The car situation really showed their true colors, though. When Chloe turned 16, my parents bought her a brand new Honda Civic to boost her confidence. Meanwhile, when I turned 16, I had to get 3 part-time jobs just to save up for college because they were teaching me responsibility. I worked at the library in the mornings, did math tutoring after school, and worked weekends at a computer repair shop. Chloe totaled that Civic 3 months after getting it, and they bought her another one. But the thing about Chloe is that she was a nightmare of a kid, the kind of child other parents whispered about. She would throw massive tantrums if she didn't get her way. Even as a teenager, she'd break things, scream at our parents, and skip school, and they just made excuses for her. She's sensitive, she's just expressing herself, she's going through a phase. Meanwhile, I had to be perfect. Any grade less than an A+ would prompt my mom to make little comments about how maybe I was spreading myself too thin. If I ever showed any frustration or anger, I was being difficult and making Chloe upset. The crazy thing is, for years, I actually believed there was something wrong with me. I thought that maybe if I were just a better daughter, they'd notice me too. I spent so much time trying to get their attention, but nothing worked. I didn't realize how bad it was until I got to college and saw how other families treated each other, how my roommates' parents would call just to check in, how my friends' families would celebrate all their kids' achievements. But the best part about college was the distance. I barely went home except for major holidays, and even then, I'd make excuses to leave early. Dad would make guilt trip comments like, "Chloe really misses her big sister," but I noticed Chloe never actually called or texted unless she needed money for some business idea. By my junior year, I was excelling academically and had 3 papers published. The department head recommended me for an exchange program in South Korea, 6 months at Seoul National University working on a cutting-edge AI project. My parents didn't even notice I was leaving the country until I was already gone, they were too busy dealing with Chloe's latest drama. I was struggling with my broken Korean when my credit card wasn't working, and that's when he stepped in to translate, saving me from completely embarrassing myself. It turned out he was teaching English at an international school nearby. Richard was different from anyone I'd ever met, he actually listened when I talked, asked questions about my work, and understood the answers. When I told him about some new code I was working on, he'd get excited with me instead of zoning out. Plus, he had his own life and goals. He wasn't looking for someone to fix his problems, he was looking for a partner. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. The wedding was small but perfect, just our friends and his family. My parents said they couldn't come because Chloe needed them at home. She had gotten into some trouble with credit card fraud or something. Honestly, I was relieved they weren't there. Life was good, you know? Really good. I was successful at work, happily married, and living in a vibrant city. Richard and I traveled around Asia on weekends, tried weird foods, and learned new things together. I thought I had finally escaped all the family drama. Then my company announced they were opening a new office in Boston and wanted me to head it up, triple my salary, full relocation package, the works. Richard was excited about moving to the States. He said it would be an adventure. I wasn't thrilled about going back home, but I thought enough time had passed that maybe things with my family would be different. When we landed in Boston, my mom texted to ask if we'd arrived safely. I thought maybe she was finally showing some interest in my life. Nope, she just wanted to tell me that Chloe had moved back to Boston too. Apparently, her business ventures in California hadn't worked out. By business ventures, I mean she had convinced some wealthy guy's parents to invest in her tech startup. The startup was just a poorly designed website that never launched, and the guy's parents threatened legal action when they found out she had spent their money on fancy cars and expensive restaurants. Typical Chloe. Richard and I settled into a nice place in Cambridge, landed jobs, and everything was finally coming together. Then Chloe started showing up everywhere. First, it was just random texts, "Hey big sis, heard you're back in town." Then came emails about wanting to reconnect, saying she had grown up and changed. She wrote this long message about how therapy had helped her understand her past mistakes and that she wanted to be a real sister for once. I ignored her for 2 weeks, but then she found out where I worked. She showed up in the lobby one day, telling the receptionist she had a lunch date with me. Luckily, security checked with me first, but then she waited outside the building for 3 hours. My team could see her from our office windows, just standing there like some creepy statue. Richard thought I was being too harsh. "She's trying to make amends," he said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." He didn't know about the restraining orders or the money issues. I hadn't told him because, honestly, I was embarrassed. Who wants to admit their sister is basically a professional scammer? But Chloe was clever. She had always been good at manipulating people. She started sending Richard these long emotional messages about how much she regretted not being a better sister, how proud she was of my success, and how she just wanted to be part of our lives. Richard kept pushing me to give her a chance. "She seems sincere," he'd say. "People can change." I wasn't buying it, but he was determined to play peacemaker. Then, without telling me, he invited her over for dinner. I walked in after work, exhausted, only to find Chloe sitting in my living room like she belonged there. The audacity! My stomach dropped, and for a second, I thought I'd lost my mind. Had I invited her and forgotten? No, this was Richard's doing. I pulled him aside in the kitchen, keeping my voice low. "Did you invite her here without asking me?" He sighed, crossing his arms. "I just thought if you actually talked, maybe you'd see she's trying." I brushed it off. At that moment, I didn't want to start a conflict with Richard in front of her. A small part of me wondered what if she really had changed. Back in the living room, Chloe put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. She brought an expensive gift, probably bought with someone else's money, asked all the right questions about my work, and pretended to care about our life in Korea. Hell, she even managed to fake some tears while apologizing for our childhood, acting like the lost sister who just wanted redemption. After that dinner, she started coming around more often, always when I was at work, just keeping Richard company. He's still adjusting to Boston from Seoul. We had a family dinner. We were all sitting around the dinner table, me, Richard, and my parents. It was one of those rare family dinners where things actually felt normal, and for once, Chloe wasn't the center of attention. Then Richard put down his fork, took a deep breath, and said, "I've been researching surrogacy agencies." I think we should start the process. My heart nearly burst. We had been talking about starting a family, and this felt like the first step. My parents gasped in excitement, with my mom already rambling about baby names and my dad clapping me on the back. But Chloe, she didn't look surprised at all. She just sat there smiling this weird little smile before saying, "This family is getting bigger in all the best ways." Something about it made my stomach turn. I didn't know why at the time, but looking back, that was the moment everything started falling apart. After the surrogacy announcement, Chloe's behavior took a turn for the bizarre. At first, I thought she was just overly excited, but then she started showing up uninvited more often, constantly. Every other day there she was, acting like she had some unspoken right to be involved. "Got to check on my favorite brother-in-law," she'd say, grinning like she belonged there. Then came the comments, little things that fell off. "Our baby is going to be so strong already," she'd say way too casually. Crazy how connected I feel to this whole thing. The way she talked about it wasn't just enthusiasm, it was possessive, like she saw herself as more than just an aunt. I thought she was just being her usual annoying self, but then little things started adding up, things I couldn't ignore. I mentioned it to Richard, how Chloe seemed a little too involved. "It's weird, right?" I said, expecting him to agree. Instead, he sighed like I was exhausting him. "You're being paranoid. Chloe's just happy for us." "Happy for us or happy for you?" He rolled his eyes, brushing past me into the kitchen. "God, you always think the worst of people. She's trying to be better, and you're looking for reasons to push her away." That should have been my warning, but I let it go, thinking maybe I was overthinking it. One night, I got home late from work and noticed the front door was unlocked. I was sure I had locked it that morning, but I figured maybe Richard had just forgotten after taking out the trash or something. Still, it nagged at me, so I pulled up the security camera feed to check if anything was off. That's when I saw the error message, "Error with storage settings." The system wasn't recording anymore, the past week's footage was gone. That stopped me cold. I knew those cameras were set up right, and more importantly, I had them automatically backing up to cloud storage, something I hadn't told anyone, not even Richard. I started noticing other little things too, like how Richard always put his phone face down now, or how he'd suddenly end calls when I walked into the room, or how Chloe seemed to know exactly what was in our fridge without ever asking. One night, I couldn't sleep, I just lay there thinking about all these weird things happening. Richard was sleeping next to me, looking so peaceful. The surrogacy process was making him tired all the time. That's when I remembered the cloud backup for the security cameras. I got up, went to my home office, and logged into the cloud storage account. There were hundreds of saved clips. I started with the week I was in Seoul. The first clip showed Chloe coming over right after I left for the airport. Nothing weird there, Richard had said she was helping him unpack. The second clip showed Chloe and Richard sitting really close on the couch, watching a movie. Still could be innocent. Then came the clip of Chloe kissing Richard in our kitchen. That's when I started shaking. The clip showed everything: Chloe coming over every single day while I was gone, them getting closer and closer, Richard letting her in late at night. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, like I was watching my worst nightmare play out in real time. Every buried fear, every doubt I tried to push aside, they were all true. Chloe wasn't just pushing boundaries, she had bulldozed right through them, straight into my home, my marriage, my life. And Richard? He let her in, welcomed her like it was normal. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was how casual they were about it, like they'd done this before. They hung out in the kitchen, cooked together, watched TV on our couch. Chloe would bring groceries like she lived there. There was this one clip that really got to me. They were in the kitchen, and were able to trace the money back to her, revealing a pattern of deceit that was both shocking and infuriating. Richard hadn't just been unfaithful, he had actively participated in Chloe's schemes, using our shared finances to support her lifestyle while I was working hard to build our future. Living with this knowledge felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I had given Richard everything: my trust, my love, my commitment, and he had thrown it all away for someone who had always been a source of pain in my life. I couldn't believe I had been so blind, so trusting. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, and the anger I felt was a fire that fueled my determination to take back control of my life. After filing for divorce, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. My parents, in their misguided loyalty to Chloe and Richard, continued to push against me. They called me incessantly, trying to convince me that I was making a mistake, that I was throwing away my family for the sake of pride. My mom's voice dripped with concern, but I could hear the underlying judgment. "Honey, you need to think about what this will do to your future. You can't just walk away from your marriage. You have to be the bigger person." I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped in a twisted version of reality where my own family was siding with the people who had betrayed me. I had always been the one to support them, to be there for them, and now they were turning their backs on me. It was infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. I had to remind myself that I was not the villain in this story, I was the one who had been wronged. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on my case against Chloe and Richard. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, documenting their lies and deceit. I reached out to the victims of Chloe's scams, and with my lawyer's help, we built a solid case against her. It felt empowering to take action, to fight back against the manipulation that had plagued my life for so long. Meanwhile, Richard and Chloe were blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. They continued to flaunt their relationship, posting pictures on social media, acting as if they were the perfect couple. It made my blood boil, but I knew that their facade wouldn't last forever. The truth always has a way of coming to light, and I was determined to make sure it did. Then came the day I had been waiting for. My lawyer called me with the news that the class action lawsuit against Chloe had been filed. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I realized that the tables were finally turning. Chloe's world was about to come crashing down, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at the thought of her facing the consequences of her actions. As the lawsuit gained traction, I received messages from other victims who had been scammed by Chloe. They shared their stories with me, and I felt a sense of solidarity with them. We were all victims of her manipulation, and together, we were going to hold her accountable. It was a powerful feeling, knowing that I was not alone in this fight. Richard, on the other hand, was starting to panic. He reached out to me, trying to plead his case, but I was done listening to his excuses. "You made your choice, Richard," I told him firmly. "You chose her over me, and now you have to deal with the consequences." I could hear the desperation in his voice as he tried to convince me that he still loved me, that he wanted to make things right, but I wasn't interested in his empty promises anymore. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I was ready to face Chloe and Richard, to finally confront them about everything they had done. As I walked into the courtroom, I could feel the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders. I was no longer the victim, I was the one in control. When Chloe walked in, I could see the confidence draining from her face as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had always been the one in control, manipulating everyone around her, but now the tables had turned. I watched as she tried to put on a brave face, but it was clear that she was rattled. The hearing was intense, with testimonies from the victims and evidence presented against her. I felt a sense of vindication as I listened to their stories, knowing that we were all standing together against her. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and laid out everything that had happened: the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. I could see Richard squirming in his seat, and it felt good to finally have my voice heard. As the judge deliberated, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long time. I froze all the accounts immediately and reported the suspicious activity to the bank's fraud department. Meanwhile, my parents were still pushing their lawsuit, demanding I pay $5,000 monthly for Chloe's basic needs and another $3,000 for Richard's expenses. They even had the nerve to request $50,000 for Chloe's new startup, all while trying to manipulate me about the surrogacy situation. The court date for their financial demands came exactly when I wanted it to. As my parents sat there, smugly confident in their righteousness, my lawyer unleashed our counterattack. She presented evidence of Chloe's ongoing fraud schemes, showed how my parents had enabled and covered up her crimes for years, and revealed bank statements proving they had helped her hide money from previous victims. The judge ordered an investigation into their potential role in Chloe's fraudulent activities. Their faces went from smug to terrified in seconds as they realized they had walked right into our trap. Richard wasn't spared either. the evidence of his complicity in Chloe's financial schemes destroyed his credibility. The school board launched an ethics investigation when they discovered he had been helping Chloe target wealthy parents with her investment scams. His teaching career imploded overnight. Chloe's house of cards collapsed spectacularly. Through the investigation, former victims came forward, and her current scams were exposed. Her reputation was destroyed. No one would trust her with $1, let alone invest in her schemes. She tried fleeing to Florida, but her accounts were frozen, her credit was ruined, and she had nowhere to turn. Every time my parents or Richard's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling or abusive because of the security cameras, it just made them look worse. The evidence showed I had installed them for home security while traveling, not for surveillance. Their attempts to twist it backfired, making them appear desperate and dishonest. But I wasn't done. I needed to know about the surrogacy situation. By the time we got to the court hearing about the surrogacy contract, Chloe was facing multiple investigations, Richard was unemployed and facing potential criminal charges for financial complicity, and my parents were drowning in legal fees from their failed lawsuit. Their perfect little world had crumbled, and I hadn't even had to get my hands dirty, I just let the law do its work. As we dealt with the surrogacy contract situation, I realized I didn't even care anymore about their destruction. I was focused on the future, my future and possibly my future child's future. If we proceeded with the surrogacy, I was ready to fight for full parental rights, and thanks to our careful documentation of everything, I was in the perfect position to win. I will update you guys about it all once everything clears out. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's been a wild couple of weeks since my last update, and I need to get this off my chest. Buckle up because this story somehow got even crazier. Remember how I mentioned the surrogacy situation was pending? Well, we found out the surrogacy process hadn't actually started yet, despite what they claimed. When Sarah, my lawyer, called with the findings, I had to sit down. It's like life has a sick sense of humor, you know? The one thing that could have made this mess even more complicated hadn't actually happened. But here's where it gets interesting. The day after we got the results, Richard showed up at my door, demanding I drop all legal proceedings because family should stick together. The court proceedings revealed they had attempted to manipulate the surrogacy contract to give Chloe parental rights. My lawyer proved they had been planning to exclude me from the process entirely. The judge was particularly disturbed by the evidence showing they had contacted multiple agencies pretending to be a married couple. The audacity of this man. He brought Chloe with him, and they tried to pitch me some nonsense about co-parenting as a modern family. Turns out they were completely broke after their accounts got frozen, and they were hoping to move into my house. Yeah, you read that right. The best part? They recorded the whole conversation, thinking they could use it against me somehow. Except they forgot about one tiny detail: my security system records audio too. So now I have crystal clear footage of them attempting to extort me and admitting to several other schemes they've been running. Sarah says this is like Christmas came early for our case. And Chloe? Well, karma hit fast. She tried scamming some investors in Florida, except one of them turned out to be an undercover FBI agent. My parents had to sell their vacation home to bail her out. They're still insisting she's just misunderstood and that I should help her get back on her feet. Richard's life is imploding spectacularly too. Remember that school board investigation? They found evidence he was using his position as a teacher to get parents' financial information for Chloe's scams. He's now facing an investigation from the Department of Education, and several parents are filing civil suits.